I'm Connor Ruebusch, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello and welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Ruebusch. With me is Dr. Patrick Wyman, and we are covering a lot of fights on today's episode. We're going to kick things off, of course, with a recap and discussing and breaking down our favorite moments from UFC Fight Night Fortaleza, UFC Fight Night 106, UFC Fight Night Belfort versus Gastelum. Vitor Belfort had a pretty good showing against Kelvin Gastelum in the main event of that card before getting shut down as expected. Couple of other interesting upsets and one very shocking highlight from one Edson Barboza that we are excited to talk about. After that, we're going to move on to UFC London, which is taking place next week, and that's just before we get, I think, a 2-week hiatus from UFC events, which is a little scary, but also a little exciting when you cover as many fights as we do. You kind of get relieved for those moments. But next week, we've got Jimmy Manuwa taking on Corey Anderson in the main event and a couple of other very interesting fights. Gunnar Nelson, Alan Jouban stands out as the co-main. We're going to talk about that later on in the show. Before any of that, Pat, first of all, how you doing today?
Rocking and rolling, man. Busy week this week. A lot of stuff happening. Excited to talk about some fights.
Yeah, I just figured it's been a while since we've done like on-air pleasantries. Normally you get this out of the way off the air, but sometimes a greeting, you know what I mean? It brings people in. People hear that.
Yeah, you might think that our listeners would be inclined to think more of us if they knew that we were actually friendly, as opposed to just handling all of our pleasantries off air. Like, no, sometimes it's nice to have a little pleasantry on air.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it did take us like a year and a half of working together before we realized that we both shared like the same favorite author and other important details like that. So there's an argument to be made that perhaps we spend up too much of our time talking about fights and professional things. But what can you do? Pleasantries are a little bit, they go a little way towards helping that. Pleasantries are done now. So let's get into fight talk. That's it. No more smiling, no more fun, no more joy.
I can see you smiling. Connor. Stop it. This is not a fun sport. This is not fun business.
You know who wasn't smiling, Pat? Was Vitor Belfort at the end of this weekend's main event. I felt going into this fight that Vitor Belfort had a decent chance of catching Kelvin Gastelum with something early. Just given Kelvin's style, his pretty short reach, and his not perfect defense coming forward, I thought Vitor Belfort still dangerous, right? He's an even more defined one-round fighter than he ever was, but still very dangerous in that first round. Still got hand speed, still got power, still got timing, and he did catch Kelvin a few times, but absolutely no problems for Kelvin. No trouble taking what punches did land, no trouble avoiding the ones that didn't, and no trouble just coming right back and snapping off some very fast punches of his own to end Vitor's night. What did you make of the fight?
I think you hit most of the high points here. Unlike a lot of the other old fighters that we're seeing still hanging around at the highest levels of the UFC, I have never felt like Vitor was done quite the way some of the other guys were. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, Vitor has always, even in his worst performances, still shown flashes of what he's capable of. I think except for maybe the Jacare one. The Jacare one was a pretty one-sided blowout. But in all of the other ones, he's shown you that he can still, even if only for a moment, reach into what used to make him so special. Even 39, almost 40-year-old dad bod Vitor literally has been fighting in the UFC for 20 years. He still has enough there to make him dangerous. And I think against the right caliber of opposition, if you weren't throwing him in there with the Jacares and the Musasis and the Kelvin Gaslums of the world, I genuinely think Vitor could be competitive with a Talis Laites or somebody like that.
For sure. Absolutely. Vitor to me is kind of like middleweight's Alistair Overeem, where he's got these same problems. They are persistent. They are slowly getting worse and maybe more emphasized by his age. But also he's not, despite, like Alistair, fighting for an insanely long time, he's not really slowing down that much. You kind of just, I don't know. It's like he doesn't even really mind being knocked out. Like in the moment, he doesn't like it, but you get the sense from he and Alistair that it's just like their job at this point. They've been doing it for 2 decades each. So they just show up, they do a fight, it works out, it doesn't work out, back to the gym, time to do it again. So you get these little adjustments throughout their careers, and they never really slow down. I just think both guys have proven that they clearly have an idea of how to do this. So, yeah, I let me float a theory towards you, actually, because I was thinking about this last week. I kind of have a feeling that Vitor Belfort, he certainly, I mean, Dad Bod Vitor is definitely a stark contrast to TRT Tour. He certainly has lost some of that muscle mass and definition, and he seems to have about 90% fewer veins in his body now. But the strength was a factor when he was on the testosterone, but I kind of have this feeling that it wasn't the thing that Vitor really felt he needed. I don't think Vitor's big successful run a couple years ago was so much a result of the fact that he was hitting way harder or moving way faster or was much stronger, or even necessarily that he was able to recover more easily in training. There's certainly some of that to it, I think, but again, this is a guy who's been fighting at a pretty consistent rate since 1996. So he knows what he's doing in training. I'm sure he's got his recovery times more or less nailed down. He has been doing it professionally for a very long time. I think the biggest boon for Vitor during the TRT phase was the confidence and the willingness to take risks and the innate aggression that people get from testosterone. It's not just a physical thing, but anybody who's done TRT or testosterone or steroids would tell you that it does have a profound mental effect on how you feel. And Vitor, like Overeem, has this problem of folding. Like his chin is not as big a problem as he thinks it is. And the fact that he knows it's a problem is the biggest flaw in his game, is that he's
I don't
worried
think it's
about
the aggression part of it. I think it's just the straight up confidence.
Right.
Like,
just the willingness to, like, you can get hit and you'll respond with well, now it's my turn, rather than oh shit, it's all going wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a multi-dimensional and kind of multi-layered thing, like knowing how much harder you've been able to work in training. Like that confidence is not just like, yeah, I know I'm juiced to the gills. Like, yeah, of course I can take his shot. I think there's a little more to it than that, but I don't disagree that Vitor was effective because he was confident far more than any other thing.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying, by the way, that the knowledge of being juiced is the confidence. I'm saying that testosterone itself makes people more confident.
That's not exactly. I mean, we don't really have time to go into a deep breakdown of the personality effects of of anabolic compounds and androgens, but like it's not quite that simple. It's not like, oh, I'm taking testosterone, I feel super confident.
Well,
like,
yeah, you'll forgive me for putting it in layman's terms. I mean, I'm basing this off of things that I've heard from other people who have used TRT treatments, like Eugene of Bloody Elbow talks about the different feeling that you have going into a competition when you have benefited from hormone replacement compared to when you are fighting with legitimately lowered testosterone levels, which Vitor probably did have because of all the years of steroid abuse before he went on TRT. He probably did have quite low levels of T.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's not the same thing as testosterone makes you confident.
Sure, yeah. It's more complicated than that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, no, he the more confident Vitor was definitely the dangerous one, because that was always the thing. It was never, can he knock you out? It's, can he let his shots go to knock you out? Can
he not knock you out and still feel okay about it?
Yeah, those were always the concerns at play there. But yeah, I thought he looked okay here. I thought he did a good job of pulling the trigger, like a much better job than he's done in his last few fights, of just letting his shots go when he felt Gastelum walk into his range.
Yes, I'm totally with you on that. I think there were a few moments when Vitor he did get a little desperate after he got tagged the first time, started to kind of throw a little more crazily and recklessly. But overall, I thought his timing was on point, and I think it makes Kelvin Gastelum look better for having beaten him, because Gastelum was, of course, expected to, but not only did he get a dominant first-round win, but he also did survive what looked to be a pretty good version of Vitor. So what did you think mostly of Gastelum's performance?
I think that it showed exactly why everybody should be so excited about Gastelum as a talent. Like, I genuinely think that if he could make 170 consistently and safely, he would be the champion in that division. That's how talented I think he is.
Wow.
His game is pressure oriented and pressure focused. He's as durable as you need to be to do that. Basically, I think he's a more dangerous on the feet version of Rafael dos Anjos. And once he improves his wrestling a little bit more, I mean, it's already good, but like, I think he could be basically a new generation Rafael dos Anjos, but better, basically, because I think he's an even more imposing athlete and has naturally heavier hands and is inclined to work at a quicker pace. Like, I think he has better cardio.
Yeah, and he could develop that game at just 25, whereas it took RDA a long career before he made it to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Gastelum is I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of the talk about him has to do with him at welterweight, but what do you think of him at middleweight? I mean, how far we touched on this briefly last week, but considering this performance, we saw how great his speed is. I think he is more comfortable now flirting with range and being a little closer to the opponent than he was before, especially against a pretty big dude like Vitor. Looked really sharp and confident through his combinations. What do you think is the limiting factor for him if he does indeed stay at middleweight?
It's just going to be height and reach. Like, past a certain point, your aggression and forward movement and pressure is not going to be enough if you're fighting somebody who's 6 inches taller than you. And there are a lot of dudes in that division who are 5 or 6 inches taller than him.
Yeah.
Like, how is he going to get inside on a 6'3" stick and move outside striker? Like, even think about it like this. Like, I think he would probably find a way to win this fight. I think he'd have to gut it out. But like, Krzysztof Jotko is a difficult stylistic matchup for Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah.
Not just because of the stylistic matchup, but because he's 4 inches taller and has 6 inches in reach.
Is he really? Because he doesn't even seem like that big of a middleweight.
He's not. That's my point. Gastelum is not a tall welterweight. He is a tiny middleweight in terms of his height and reach. Like, it's not about size and strength, I don't think. Like, this to me has always been the thing about trying to understand size and weight cutting. It's not about strength. It's not about how much muscle do you have on your frame. It's not really, I don't think, about throwing the other guy around. It's about how does your height and reach stack up with other opponents in that division.
Yeah, I mean, strength does play a factor to an extent. You have some guys who are already long and tall who make the transition, like Yakovlev. Alexander Yakovlev made the switch down to lightweight very briefly because he felt he wasn't strong enough to out-wrestle people at welterweight. So, I mean, it's there, but you basically think that height, length are the most important factors behind weight class?
Yeah, I think that, yes, I understand that that's why fighters tell themselves that they go down a weight class. Yeah. I think that is way, way less important than height and reach.
Well, we've argued many times in the past for fighters not chasing that strength. I mean, I firmly believe that more time is spent invested in technical training and careful thought and tape study would reward fighters more than the vast amount of time and energy and money they spend on trying to get themselves down an extra like 2 pounds so they can be marginally stronger than the weakest guys in the new division. You know, I do think that, yeah, I would, but that's the thing. I kind of like Gastelum at middleweight because he's a little pudgy. I don't think he has to do a crazy cut to make welterweight in the first place, but I like seeing guys who get to use the advantages of being a smaller guy in the division, because there are many, you know, getting inside and hiding your shots, getting in low and really being difficult to track down and having a speed advantage. Those things help Kelvin Gastelum here. So,
yeah, well, and he fights long, you know, it's not like he's not like Hector Lombard fights small and he fights short and he always has. That has, except a little bit against Johnny Hendricks. He did a better job against Hendricks of fighting long.
Yeah.
But like Lombard is always a dude who, regardless of what weight class he's fought in, has fought like a short guy. Gastelum doesn't fight like a short guy. Gastelum fights with a variety of long range tools. He's got a nice jab. He throws hard kicks.
He's got a great jab, man. I was really just appreciating it in this fight.
It's an educated jab. It's a much more educated jab than you would expect a 25-year-old southpaw to have.
Yeah.
In MMA. Like there's a lot to be said for that. And that is going to, like Robert Whittaker too, he fights long for a guy in that weight class. But even Whittaker is 2 or 3 inches taller than Gastelum.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And we think of Whittaker as a tiny middleweight. So I don't know. I think Gastelum can still be a top 5 middleweight just because he's so talented and because his game works so well and because he's a really good pressure fighter and because he fights long. But I just think there's a point at which, like, I don't know what he would do if you put him in there with Luke Rockhold.
Right. Yeah. What could he possibly do against someone who is probably at least 5 inches taller than him, at least 5 inches longer of reach? Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's the guy that I brought up last week too. Like Luke Rockhold seems like Luke Rockhold is light heavyweight sized at least. He's a big dude, and
he's a 225 pound guy who cuts down. But I would pick Gastelum over Michael Bisping. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think I might too. What is going on in middleweight? I've reveled in the weirdness of this division for a long time now, but it's kind of weirder than ever that I would actually pick unranked Kelvin Gastelum, welterweight contender, to probably kind of just destroy Michael Bisping. I really think it would actually not be that hard of a fight for him.
I don't think. Well, that's the weird part about this is, like, there are 6 or 7 middleweights that I would pick over Michael Bisping. I would pick Luke Rockhold over him in a rematch. I would pick Chris Weidman over him. I'd pick Yoel Romero. I'd pick Jacare. I'd pick Robert Whittaker. I would take Gastelum. Who else am I forgetting here? Would I take I don't think I'd take Vitor over him in a rematch. No. And I don't think I'd take Anderson over him in a rematch. But so that's 6 guys off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. 1 or 2 other guys.
Well, Dan Kelly, obviously.
Well, obviously Dan Kelly.
It goes without saying. Really, yeah. Dan Kelly, the god. Yeah, well, Belfort Gastelum, interesting fight. Not as depressing as I actually expected it to be, although, of course, every time a Brazilian gets knocked out in Brazil, the stunning, deafening silence of the crowd is always something to look forward to. Really takes the sting out of that, what should be a triumphant moment for one of the fighters. But light heavyweights, here we did get a triumphant moment. We got Shogun Rua, old man Shogun Rua, although, as always, you look at his age, and he is shockingly young, considering how he has looked for the past 5 years. He's just been through a lot of punishment, a lot of wars, been fighting for a long time. Took on John Vellante. I feel like a moron for picking John Vellante in this fight, Pat. Can I say that outright? I mean, I really, even though it makes total sense still in my head that, this is a good style matchup for Shogun, but John Vellante will eventually catch him. But let's be honest, John Vellante, one of the worst defensive fighters in MMA.
I thought that was a crazy pick in the first place because John Vellante has never met a punch that he didn't want to block with his face.
You are right.
And Shogun, despite being older and obviously not the fighter he used to be, is both durable, he's better defensively, and he's a much cleaner counterpuncher. Like, if there's a thing that Shogun can still do, it's throw counters in the pocket, and that's everybody who has ever tried to throw a counterpunch at John Vellante has fucking clobbered him.
Yeah.
Every single person ever in his entire career, from Chad Griggs to Shogun Rua. Everybody who has tried to hit John Vellante in the face with a counterpunch has succeeded.
Can we talk about that? Because we this is speculation, of course, but I would love to try and tap into why that is. Because one is inclined to think that it's something wrong with John Vellante. But I think there has to be some kind of coaching disconnect there. Because in this fight, his corner was screaming at him to move his head, which some people take as evidence that he's just not listening. But when he tried, it's like he doesn't know how. Like he doesn't have the mechanics for good head movement. Nobody's ever taught him to fold his hip and slip a punch technically. And
that is a deep and ongoing weakness of the camp that he trains with. Look at all of the guys that camp produces. None of them can move their head. Dennis Bermudez comes closest, and even his head movement is not what I would call technical. I would say it's more like I've been in a bajillion sparring sessions. I've spent years in the game. Like I've kind of figured out some head movement that works kind of for me.
His is like
he's tremendously hittable.
Yeah, his is more like 60% of the time a right hand comes when I throw my right hand, so I'm going to slip and roll right after it. It's all preordained.
Yeah,
it's not organic.
And who are the other guys? Chris Wade. Chris Wade I don't think has ever moved his head once in a fight. And then Vellante. So those are the guys that come out of that camp. They're all offensively dynamic kickboxers who throw good volume, who throw with real power, who have kind of good offensive fundamentals, but none of them has the slightest idea of how to be a crafty defensive fighter.
Is Vellante all Belmore now?
He always has been, basically.
I thought he did. He is listed as being sometimes a member of Cerro Longo and Long Island MMA.
He goes over and he goes over and he wrestles and he does jiu-jitsu there.
He's kind of like a sparring partner for Chris Weidman, basically.
And they're buddies, but like his striking coaches have always been the Belmore dudes.
He's also Zane Simon and I realized Chris Weidman's id. He is like the projection of the like infantile man-child that Chris Weidman, married with kids, probably still wants to be in some part of his inner soul.
That's if you could just play clips of the two of them playing FIFA or Madden or whatever, like I think you would make them both stars with a particular brand of American bro.
Yeah. That's what, but especially Vellante. You know what I mean? Like Vellante is the one, he like pulls Weidman back into that bro mentality. He's like his escape from the mature life that he now leads, which is why when this fight ended, I immediately tweeted.
Giving Weidman just a bit too much credit.
Well, when I tweeted when the fight was over, I tweeted, "This is why Chris Weidman should be thankful he has wife and kids, because otherwise you don't want to be John Vellante, man." Yeah, the defensive flaws of John Vellante are pretty tremendous. I mean, very, very a guy who rarely thinks to move his head, but honestly, I think does not know how to do it. Like, I don't think anyone's ever given him the technique to move his head.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think as a broader kind of point to build off of that, like head movement is not just a thing that you do. It's a skill that needs to be learned and taught. There are fundamentals to it. There's technique to it. Like, it's not just a thing that you pick up. You need to have somebody who teaches you how to do it properly. And frankly, until I started doing like Dutch style and then I started boxing, nobody ever taught me how to do it right.
Yeah.
Like,
and there are guys out there who improvise, like Sean Strickland does not have technical head movement, but is still pretty hard to hit. Vellante is neither. He doesn't have good eyes, and he doesn't have technical head movement. So he's just.
What do you mean? So I think I understand what you're saying, but what do you mean for our listeners when you say he doesn't have good eyes?
Okay, awareness, basically. Like, eyes are something that you usually talk about with a fighter who has a lot of experience, either in sparring. You often see it with guys who are young fighters, but who have spent a lot of time traveling to other camps to prepare people and to imitate other fighters and just to be in there and basically go in there and professionally get beaten up for another person's camp. You see it a lot of times in those guys. Also in the young veterans that we like to talk about so much. But these guys who have just extremely good awareness, that they know how to read what's coming, not just from seeing the strike approaching their face, but just being aware of what the opponent's body is doing. So when they land a jab and their left arm is out, they can't see through it. Their vision is obstructed by their jab, but they see the guy's shoulder on the opposite side of his body shift a little bit. They know that the cross counter is coming, and they will be at least braced for it when it does come. John Vellante doesn't have that. He's always surprised when he gets hit. He's shocked by every single counter, which is terrifying because he gets countered all the time.
Yeah, and you can be a really experienced fighter and not have what we would consider great eyes. I think Luke Rockhold does not do a great job of seeing shots coming.
That's a good one.
Like, I think there are a lot of fighters who want Michael Bisping too. I don't think Bisping has ever had particularly good eyes in terms of seeing shots coming at him, or even I think eyes can also go offensive too. Like, what shot is in front of me? Mm-hmm. What is my opponent doing? Can you read your opponent in either direction, offensively or defensively?
Sure. Yeah.
Like even I'll give you another good example of this. Like Frankie Edgar, I don't think has especially good eyes. I don't think he does it. I think he has he moves his head competently. He puts his offense together extremely competently, but it's not like I don't think it's so much that he's reading what his opponent is doing to him, so much as he's pre-programmed. I think this comes back to our organic versus rote thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's a good discussion, actually. We should continue it sometime. Kelvin Gastelum, I think, has good eyes, good shot placement, good defense, good defensive awareness, even though his defense is not that good. Like, there are a lot of guys like that. I'm fascinated by Sean Strickland. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, but he is very much that kind of fighter where he clearly a lot of leaning and sticking his chin up in the air and just sort of parrying and pulling away off balance. The technique has not been trained into him, but you'll be damned if you can hit Sean Strickland with more than 3 or 4 really clean punches in a fight. Mm-hmm. Just because, I mean, even if you manage to hit him, he knows it's there. He always sees it coming. And his shot placement is also, of course, very good. He's very accurate. So, yeah, that's a very interesting topic. John Vellante doesn't have it. Doesn't have those eyes. Shogun Rua probably has it more than ever. Great awareness in the pocket and has really, as you said, become an excellent counterpuncher. I think it is insane that this is now the best run of Shogun's UFC career.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
As pointed out by our friend Phil McKenzie, he's now got the first 3-fight win streak of his entire UFC career. I mean, it's only the second win streak in general of his UFC career. That is shocking. His last win streak was Mark Coleman and Chuck Liddell in 2009.
That's insane. That is totally insane.
I mean, he has been fighting. I mean, now he's fighting a lesser level of competition. It has something to do with that. He had fought the best guys in the division for a long time. But also, I think Shogun has settled into being the old fighter now and is doing it really well. I think he and Cordero are really gelling at the moment. At least that's what I can gather from their fights.
Yeah, and Cordero wasn't even there for this camp. Brian Stan said on the broadcast that he was just directing him remotely.
Wow.
And that's fantastic. That's that seems to work for them. As long as there is somebody telling Shogun the things that he needs to do, I think Shogun can be competitive for a couple of years yet.
Yeah.
The problem is when Shogun tries to do everything himself and tries to run his camps, because Shogun is not his own best head coach. We know that. You know, when Shogun has somebody who's riding herd on him and telling him these are the things you need to work on these combinations. You need to be doing this much wrestling, this much grappling, this much striking instruction. Don't spar so much. He needs somebody who's telling him those things. Yeah.
Do you think this is a nice compromise then for a late career Shogun where he kind of does get to have his own camp, but Cordero is still basically overseeing it? Like, he's basically franchised himself as Cordero's student.
Yeah, I think that works for him. I mean, and also Shogun at this point, when it comes to these things, we can't let it purely be a matter of, well, he's going to get better instruction there, or this is what he needs to do if he wants to succeed at this level. Like, Shogun doesn't want to be away from his wife and kids. That really matters to him. It really bothered him when he came up here and was like by himself for a few months doing his camps. That was not good for him in terms of his mental state. Mm-hmm. Like, I will always remember Shogun on the phone with my coach, because Shogun apparently does not know how to work a GPS on his phone. Shogun on the phone with my coach as my coach was directing him through Huntington Beach. It's like, it's stuff like that, like that kind of stuff matters. And if there's a way for Shogun to get the kind of instruction he needs without, wrenching himself away from his family, all the better for him.
Yeah, I did say he's always surprisingly young when I look at his age, but not knowing how to work his smartphone, he is in fact an old veteran. That is certifiably true now.
He is. Maybe he's learned how to do it in the last 4 or 5 years.
Probably not. He's probably using his phone as nothing more than a flashlight to read menus in restaurants, while probably complaining about why do they keep it so dark in here, and is anyone else cold, and why is the print so small? God damn it!
Jesus Christ! It's all all of that. Should we take a quick break and we come back?
Let's take a break.
Do Dariush Barboza?
Yes, we'll do Barboza and Dariush when we come back. Among several other fights from next week's card, Manua versus Anderson. After this break. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And we are back. Edson Barboza killed Beneil Dariush. Fortunately, not literally, but had a tough fight with Beneil Dariush and instantly destroyed him with one of the prettiest and scariest flying knees you will ever see in MMA. What was your reaction when that happened, Pat?
I stood up and yelled, and then my wife yelled at me because the baby was asleep. That is how that happened.
Yeah. It was it was a good moment. It was a real stunning moment. And you've got to consider now that Edson Barboza may have the most impressive highlight reel in the lightweight division.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's still McGregor. I think McGregor has a fantastic highlight reel.
In lightweight? Only one highlight at lightweight.
Do we just don't count his prior things, or are we talking about
I guess
finishes
I don't
in
know,
the lightweight
man.
division, or fighters who are currently competing at lightweight who have a highlight reel?
I guess. I mean, you can be a hair splitter about it, but we're talking the flying knee. We're talking about the spinning kick against Terry Edom way back. We're talking about the leg kicks against Oliveira, but also against Pettis and against Melendez. I don't know, man. Barboza's got he's got a hell of a highlight, is the point.
I think you're right. I do think it's Barboza. But in terms of level of competition, taking all of that into account, I think McGregor's is. Sure. I think McGregor has the best.
That's fair. But Dariush was giving Barboza all he could handle for the first portion of this fight. And we did say last week that we expected Dariush to pressure quite a lot, and that we thought too that he would probably find some success with it, because Barboza just innately, I think, is a fighter who does not like being pressured. He likes to have his space, he likes to have time to think, he likes to be able to pick his shots. And so a fight like the one he had with Anthony Pettis is probably the ideal fight for Barboza, whereas ones with Dariush and Michael Johnson and certainly Tony Ferguson are less desirable, because they put him into this killer be killed mode that I don't think he enjoys being in. Dariush, I thought, walked the line really, really well between the craziness of Ferguson and the sort of the unsustainability of Michael Johnson. I thought he did a really good job of being a measured pressure fighter, which is especially good considering that he, like Barboza, is not really known for having a granite chin.
I thought that Dariush did a much better job than Ferguson did in the first round of this fight of getting after Barboza responsibly.
Yes.
I thought Ferguson did a lot of following. When I went back and rewatched that fight, Ferguson had done a lot of following of Barboza. He also cut him off, but there were a lot of times where he was kind of following him through the cage. And that was when Barboza was able to sit down, throw 3 or 4 shots, and then immediately get out, was when Ferguson followed. And I thought that was what Dariush did much better, was Dariush never followed. So that because he was constantly right in front of Barboza never really got the chance to plant his feet and throw 3 or 4 shots and then safely get out of range. Dariush was always right there to throw multiple shots, to exchange, to make Barboza pay for sitting down and trying to scare him off.
Yeah, and I thought too that Ferguson, when he pressured Barboza, I think he actually put Barboza into a more dangerous state of mind. I think he was so aggressive in how he approached Barboza like he couldn't possibly be knocked out. He went nuts in the first round of that fight. I think we can all agree on that. And Barboza, I think, he doesn't like to be in a brawl, but we've seen that instinctively he does get into brawls to try and scare people off. That used to be a big problem for him, where he would just plant his feet and swing 4 or 5 big punches at you and then get out. So we know he has that instinct. And I think Ferguson pressured so hard that he put Barboza into that killer be killed state of mind, where Barboza was actually willing to throw 4 or 5 good shots and was hitting Ferguson a lot more coming in than he probably would have if Ferguson had come in just a little less aggressively. that Barboza would have then felt that he had a little more leisure, to a little more time to pick his shots like he likes to do. So it's a gambit, right? Because it did also end up exhausting Barboza quite a bit by round 2. But if Tony Ferguson wasn't Tony Ferguson, he might have been knocked out in that fight or badly hurt. And Dariush, I thought, very nicely walked that line of keeping the pressure on. He always threw first. He always threw last. He hit Barboza every time his feet stopped moving, but he didn't chase Barboza around the ring and put himself at undue risk, which again, that just makes Barboza's knockout all the more impressive, because this was a very smart and collected Beneil Dariush, and Barboza perfectly
Dariush did a fantastic job of you're absolutely right. I think you hit on something really important, because he did do a really good job of not allowing Barboza into that headspace where he could just throw without having to think about it.
Yes.
He made Barboza think about every single shot that he threw.
He would get him right when he was thinking about throwing a strike. So he had to second guess it every time that he got hit.
Yeah. Did you notice in this fight, way more so than Barboza has done lately, Barboza would stop to watch his work after he threw.
Mm-hmm.
So Barboza managed to Dariush managed to suck Barboza back into a headspace that he has not occupied for 2 years.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think he was suddenly doing that in this fight? Because that did stand out to me, because we've talked about it so much on the show.
I think it's because Dariush always went last. I think that after Dariush threw, Barboza was so focused on getting back to open space that then he would just stop there for a minute to collect himself. I think it was I really think it was the thinking that Dariush never let Barboza just get into a flowy kind of state of mind where he could just move and throw and move and throw and move and throw and not have to focus too much on what his opponent was trying to do to him.
He had to bend the fight. I mean, he had to actively change how he was perceiving the fight in order to adapt in that second round. He had to really think about it.
Yeah, and a thinking Barboza is generally not the best Barboza, but in this case, I think if you're going to beat Beneil Dariush, he either needs to screw up, which he did against Michael Chiesa, or you need to outthink him, and that's how Michael Johnson beat him too. Was Michael Johnson eventually outthought Dariush in that fight? I know Dariush won the decision, but I think Johnson probably won that fight. And the way that he did that was by making Dariush, was by knowing the range, by knowing the various ways that Dariush was going to come at him. He kind of outthought him for long stretches of that fight. And Barboza eventually beat Dariush by outthinking him, by knowing, okay, there's going to be something coming behind that jab. This is a smart, schooled fighter. I'm going to counter whatever it is he's trying to set up, not the jab itself.
He almost seemed to, in the second round, get Dariush into a little bit more of a reckless pace as well. Because the big adjustment from Barboza was really just to move and shorten his combinations and just be basically constantly mobile. He already does a lot of that in every fight, but the difference between the first round and the second round of this fight, he did expect, I think, in the first round that he could plant his feet at times and let Dariush come in and then trade a few punches with him. And he said that he and Mark Henry worked a lot in his pocket boxing for that purpose. And it didn't work because Dariush was, got a package being delivered. That's always fun to happen in the middle of a show. Dariush was very calculated in how he threw his strikes. He would lead with a lot of long kicks and long punches, and then he would just kind of hang there and let Barboza miss, and then he'd hit him again after Barboza threw. And every time it was this pattern repeating itself. So Barboza, he just didn't have the luxury of standing around. And so he had to think, he had to move a lot more. And I think he did manage to draw Dariush into a little more of an attack, because Dariush had to chase him a little more in that second round just to get his shots off and keep Barboza from sort of peppering him and annoying him from the outside. And I think that's why he came in and was so aggressive behind that jab and ducked right into that knee.
Yeah, I thought that the irony, despite the outcome, that shouldn't blind us to the fact that I think this was actually Dariush's best performance.
Yeah, he looked great.
Leading up to the finish. I thought it was a masterpiece of game planning and approach from Rafael Cordeiro and Dariush. And I think the fact that Barboza still managed to figure out how to win this fight is a testament to just how good Barboza has become.
Yeah, and it shows how Barboza is still the same guy he was, but is adding to that, is changing and improving. where you can still bring out the problems of the old Edson Barboza if you do the right things, but they're not going to destroy him like they did earlier in his career. They're not going to have the same profound effect. And so if we're talking about thinking versus feeling Barboza too, that's the perfect marriage of those two mindsets in that knockout, because I can't imagine how Edson Barboza could have known logically, rationally, with his thinking brain, that Dariush was going to shoot for a takedown when he had hardly shot for any takedowns. And I think that's even less likely when you consider that he had a jab in his face at the time that he was preparing to jump for that knee. Because Dariush timed his shot behind a really nice jab that caught Barboza clean. But he said after the fight he knew he was coming forward. He didn't know what it was, but he clearly felt that it was going to be a takedown attempt. And so the combination of tactical thinking and just fighter's feel led to one of the prettiest knockouts I've ever seen.
It was amazing. I mean, all credit to both parties. Like, we thought on paper that this was probably going to be the best fight on the card, and I thought that was exactly how it turned out. Like, major props to both guys.
Absolutely.
So you want to shift gears, talk about this UFC London card?
If we have to. It's not bad. It's another one of these cards, right, where you kind of have a letdown at the top, and then everything else is nothing to get excited about necessarily, but the more you talk about it, the more excited you will become, because it is a well-matched card. It's the new Maynard Shelby Classic that we've been discussing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. This does not have a lot of like high value assets on the card, but the way that they've put them together speaks to what should be a really fun day of fights.
Yeah, let's go ahead and touch on. I think we don't have a ton to say about it, so let's go ahead and touch on the main event, and then we will take a break after that and get to the rest of what we want to talk about on this card in the final segment. So Jimmy Manuwa, Corey Anderson, both of us I think are still have some hype in our hearts for Corey Anderson. I think a lot of other people's hype has kind of been dampened, although I would say a bit unfairly. Guy is still very young, very athletic, and getting better with each and every fight. He's at a very solid camp that I think suits his style. It just needs time. I think Corey Anderson will, because of the way light heavyweight is, be in a Ryan Bader situation someday, where everyone kind of thinks he's much worse than he obviously really is. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be a top 5 light heavyweight for a while, but everyone's going to be like, oh, remember when Shogun knocked him down when he was like 39 years old? Yeah, he sucks. And it doesn't paint the picture.
And I thought he still won that fight against Shogun.
True, yeah.
I thought he won 2 rounds. I thought he won the second and the third rounds of that fight. Like, that was a really, really tight fight. People are going to forget, too, that he was beating the crap out of John Vellante before Vellante landed the knockout shot on him. He's 6-2 in the UFC. He entered the promotion with like a year of pro experience, a year and a half of pro experience. He has done all of his growing as a fighter on the biggest stage possible. Yeah. Like, he got that Shogun fight. He was... What? Like, let me look this up here. I'm curious about this.
He's 27 right now.
That was the 10th fight of his pro career.
Yep.
And he was fighting Shogun in Brazil, in Curitiba.
Yep.
Like, that is a really, really rapid learning curve. He was like 3.5 years into his pro career when he got that fight. Like, give the man some credit and give him some time to breathe and develop.
It wasn't that long ago that he was a fat dude too.
Yeah.
He wasn't even like an athletic type before his MMA career. He was a guy who started.
Well, no, he was a wrestler. He was a college wrestler,
right? But wasn't he like really pudgy as a young adult, and then had to shed a bunch of weight in MMA?
Yeah, well, I think as a teenager, he was pretty out of shape.
Yeah,
so, I have a hard time imagining that he wrestled as like a pudgy, out of shape.
You can, all right, but only if you're a heavyweight wrestler,
or if you're Tim Boach,
sure,
who, as Mike Goldberg told us every single time, he wrestled heavyweights in college.
Tim Boach, I imagine, looked exactly as he does now when he was 15 years old.
I think basically since he hit puberty, he's been balding.
Yeah, he's at the same stage of baldness since puberty. I think that's and the same beer gut since he was 12 years old. I think that's Tim Boach. You gotta love him.
Sounds exactly correct.
But Corey Anderson,
what do you make of this fight?
Well, yeah, Anderson, very young. I think it would be a mistake to look at Corey Anderson and say we can just forgive his mistakes because he's young. There's still a real part of his game that he's going to make these mistakes. His inexperience is a real factor, and it does worry me a bit because I don't know. I'm thinking like the Shogun fight, the Sean O'Connell fight. We have flashes of good and bad in every Corey Anderson fight still, where we get to see the problems that are inherent in his game. What stands out to me is that he just doesn't really seem to have a ton of discipline yet, where his decision making is kind of strange. It doesn't really seem like he is thinking along a game plan the way other Mark Henry fighters do. So, for example, he'll have Shogun, and Shogun will hit him with a counter. And so instead of getting in with like 2 straight punches and then getting away, doing that 3 or 4 times, and then shooting a takedown as Shogun tries to slip a punch or blinks as a jab gets to his face, instead of doing that, he will respond to Shogun's counter by wailing on him with like 3 hard punches and just chase him down and try to teach him a lesson. And to me, that's the kind of thing that won't work against Shogun Rua. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to break his will in a fight.
Well, so that was, and you could hear in the corner of that fight, Mark Henry telling him not to do that.
Yeah, and Mark Henry too, who was like, keep the combinations short, straight punches, straight to the target, and get out. Do not stand in front of him. He just can't do it consistently yet. I have faith that Mark Henry will teach him how, but for the time being, Corey Anderson's still going in there and just kind of feeling the nerves and doing what feels right in the moment. And he doesn't necessarily know what's right in each moment yet.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's to be expected from a young fighter, especially one who's as physically gifted as Anderson is. He's quick, he's athletic, he's clearly very strong when he gets his hands on his opponents. Like, you can see the kind of leverage he has. He's got long arms.
Great stamina.
You can kind of see how, if you're that dude, when you get a little bit frustrated or when somebody does something that you don't like, you just kind of fall back on, well, yeah, I can impose myself here.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, but so as far as this matchup is concerned, I see that Manawa is a slight favorite. I get why that is, but I'm picking Anderson here. Yeah. A, because of the learning curve, and B, because I just kind of remain unsold on Jimmy Manawa as an elite fighter. Yeah,
I'm with you there. The thing is that Manawa is obviously dangerous enough to catch Corey Anderson with some single strike. He doesn't throw a lot of combinations, Jimmy Manawa, but he does have that sort of Jackson Winklejohn style, the Winklejohn-esque intelligence about what strike comes after which strike, you know, where it's everything is based on what happens before it, even if it's not happening in combination. Left hook to the liver sets up left hook to the head, sets up left kick, sets up, you know, step forward into right hand. Everything makes sense. So he's certainly good enough, powerful enough, fast enough to hurt Corey Anderson on the feet. But have we ever seen Jimmy Manawa competitively out-wrestle someone who is a good wrestler? I mean, have we seen him stuff the takedowns of somebody who really is a solid wrestler? He couldn't stuff Alexander Gustafsson's takedowns. And he couldn't stuff
Rumbles.
Yeah, Anthony Johnson's. Now, Corey Anderson may not be as imposing physically as those guys necessarily, but if he's disciplined enough to just like work behind his jab and set up takedown after takedown, I think he can probably get most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think even on the feet he should win this. It seems to me that where Anderson gets himself in trouble is when he stands in front of somebody and exchanges. And frankly, I don't think Manawa is all that good in those kinds of scenarios. He's kind of a stalk you down, pick his shots one at a time, like you said, kind of striker. Not a guy who really wants to be brawling or who wants to be exchanging. I don't think Manawa has great reactions in the moment. I don't think he's a great counterpuncher. And that to me is where Anderson is most vulnerable, is when he gets into one of these rope combinations and he's throwing 5 shots standing right in front of his opponent. That's when he gets himself in real trouble. And I don't think Manawa, A, I don't think Anderson is going to be doing as much of that here. And B, I don't think that Manawa is like the perfect matchup to exploit that, even if Anderson were doing that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Manawa tends to like his distance, likes to explode across space, likes to use the threat of that power, I think, to keep other people quiet. So that he can think and plan. And Corey Anderson will probably not do that.
Yeah, and to give Manawa some credit, like, he is really powerful. He's very fundamentally sound in single shots. He's a naturally powerful fighter, but he's also got really great like single strike fundamentals. He throws strikes the way that you would draw them up. And so that's partially what makes him such a hitter, is everything flows perfectly through an incredible athlete. It's a product of really, really good, fundamentally sound technique. But with that said, he's kind of a limited fighter. He's not real tricky.
No.
There's not a whole lot of that he does in the way of setups. His jab is inconsistent. It's a good jab when he throws it. He just doesn't do it very often. He doesn't have great footwork, and he really tends to rely on his kicks to kind of direct his opponent's movement. He doesn't have a whole lot of different setups for things. He does a little stutter step, and he'll mix up his timing and feint as he explodes forward. But it's a pretty limited array of setups that he has, and I just don't think that's enough to beat Anderson. Like, obviously, he could land the big shot and knock him out, but I think, especially in a 5-round fight, Anderson is just going to grind him out both on the feet, in the clinch, and on the ground.
Yeah, I'm feeling that as well. I'm thinking like a late TKO or submission for Anderson, 3rd or 4th round, 5th round.
Yeah, Manawa kind of a genuinely bad grappler. Also,
yeah, that's the thing here, is that there are some areas in which Manawa does have advantages technically, and he's obviously more powerful, but doesn't really look like he kind of looks like the old school stereotype of an English MMA fighter. He's like a kickboxer who wrestles okay and just kind of lays flat in his back when he's taken down. So it's I think Anderson, once he gets the takedowns going, will have a field day. I think he may be competitive with Manawa on the feet, but it does make me nervous. Even as a fan of Corey Anderson, I have to acknowledge that his inexperience is a factor at this point in his career. So,
yeah, absolutely. But I think we're going to see him get better and better. I'm looking forward to what he can offer. I'm looking forward to this fight. Like, it's a good fight. It's a shitty main event, and it's a good fight.
Yeah, it's certainly better than Swanson Lobov, which is a shitty main event and a stupid fight.
I refuse to talk about that.
This one, at least,
it's not happening.
Now we've got 2 topics that Pat will never touch on Heavy Hands. Rin Nakai is number 1. Swanson Lobov is number 2.
Why would you do that? Why would you say her name? Why would you do that, Connor?
Imagine if Artem Lobov and Rin Nakai got together and were a couple. That would be that would be the greatest. That would be everything I'd ever dreamed of. Okay, so that does it for this segment. When we come back, got a couple other fights to talk about from this card. Gunnar Nelson, Alan Jouban is one that I am personally very excited for. But we've also got Arnold Allen versus Makwan Amirkhani. Fantastic fight. Joe Duffy's put on a fight here. We got Tom Breeze, Leon Edwards, a couple of other young guys. We'll see who we have time to get to after this. But definitely Gunnar Nelson versus Alan Jouban after this break. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. And we are back. Gunnar Nelson, Alan Jouban. Let's just go ahead and kick things off and talk about this matchup. Pat, I said this at the top of the show. I will reiterate it, or I said it before we began recording, I guess. I will reiterate it now. Difficult fight to call, even more difficult than I thought when I first heard of the matchup. Like, the more fight footage I watch here, kind of the harder this one is for me to predict.
Yeah, I think from a purely stylistic perspective, I think this is actually a pretty tough matchup for Gunnar Nelson. I think on the feet, there's no question in my mind that if Nelson tries to play around and strike with him, he's going to get carved up because of the range difference. I think Jouban is the longest and most accomplished striker that Nelson has fought. And if Rick Story can carve you up with low kicks, then Alan Jouban is going to just beat the crap out of you with that nice left kick he throws. Mm-hmm. So to me, this is all about range. And that's what makes this tough. That if Nelson doesn't find clever ways of getting inside, if Nelson doesn't put his punches and kicks together, if he doesn't put his punches and takedowns together, he's just going to kind of get stuck on the end of Jouban's reach and just eat shot after shot after shot after shot.
Yeah. But Gunnar Nelson, always surprising us in particular. I think we are probably depicted by, perceived is the word I'm looking for, by a lot of MMA fans as big Gunnar Nelson haters, because I think we're the only people I know of who consistently talk about his shortcomings and his problems. And it's no secret that we're not huge fans of the some of the stuff going on over there at SBG. But Gunnar Nelson in particular is a very difficult man for me to understand. And I think you kind of feel the same way. Like, I think we get what he does well, but it's really hard to know what's going to happen going into a fight because he's such a dynamic fighter that his limitations either matter a lot or they don't matter at all in his fights. There almost seems to be no middle ground.
Yeah, I mean, even in that Albert Tumenov fight, which was a really impressive win from him, you could see the downsides of Gunnar Nelson's game.
That's true.
That I think he's a really good athlete. He's very quick. He's very explosive. As you pointed out when we were talking about this prior to recording, Connor, he's a very quick starter. And the combination of all those things, he's got this awkward rhythm, this awkward timing. He's really fast out of the gate. It makes it really tough for his opponents to figure him in the early going. Sorry, could you hear me? I cut something out real quick.
Oh, you said to figure him out in the early going?
Yeah, so he's really dangerous in the first round for that reason, because it takes a while for opponents to adjust to his raw speed, to that weird bouncy kind of footwork and timing. Mm-hmm. But once they do, it can be open season on Gunnar Nelson.
Well, because what else does he have? Like, he's going to bounce, he's going to try to throw your timing off, and he's going to bomb you with a cross. What else is there really to Gunnar Nelson's striking game?
The occasional 1-2, the occasional kick, but he doesn't work at a good pace. He doesn't put his shots together in combination very often.
He doesn't like being in the pocket.
He doesn't like to be in the pocket. He is a long distance in and out striker. He's like Stephen Thompson without the pocket boxing.
Yeah. Which is why I think the best way to look at Gunnar Nelson, to kind of know what to expect from him is, yes, to keep his most spectacular wins in mind, but also keep in mind this is a guy who in 2013 went to a fairly close 3-round decision with Jorge Santiago. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's Gunnar Nelson may have a little bit of that Johnny Hendricks in him, where it's going to be really impressive or it's going to be a close fight that he loses.
It's hard to picture Gunnar Nelson winning a one-sided decision.
Yeah, it kind of is.
He's
because,
one of those guys.
Yeah, in addition to being a fast starter, he kind of fades as well. He doesn't just start fast and then maintain his pace. He does tend to use a lot of energy up in those early rounds. And so we have his fights that go past the second round. We've got Damian Maia, who controlled him more and more as that fight went on. We've got Rick Story, who did the same and beat him up quite a lot in the later rounds of that fight. And we've got Jorge Santiago, who, despite being an old, shop-worn version of an already not quite elite fighter, gave Gunnar Nelson quite a lot to work with in a 3-round fight with him. So I don't think Gunnar Nelson's ever been the guy who can dominate somebody in a decision. And that is where Alan Jouban, I think, is even more particularly dangerous. Jouban, I think, he is a fast starter, but I don't think he really fades either. He had a hard third round with Bilal Muhammad, but really, when is the last time that Jouban has not looked best in the third round? It's usually his best round. I think he's a fast starter like Tomas Almeida. Like, he starts faster than he's actually ready to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's the case. He looked real sharp out the gate against Mike Perry, though. Was ready to roll in that fight from the very opening bell.
Yeah, but still got his third round was still the best one of that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only reason the Muhammad fight was so close down the stretch was because he knocked him down 3 times in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, he also expended a lot of energy on the last knockdown trying to finish him.
Yeah, so, I guess maybe against my better judgment, I'm still taking Gunnar Nelson here, just because I think the dynamism accounts for a lot. And frankly, as good as we think Alan Jouban is, he's never really fought anybody of Nelson's caliber.
Yeah, not even close.
And so there's kind of a levels aspect to this. Like, what level is Jouban actually on? It would not at all surprise me if Jouban just carved up Gunnar Nelson on the feet and won a clean decision or even finished him. I guess it would surprise me a bit if you finished him, because Nelson's pretty tough. But would that outcome surprise you at all here?
No, if he kind of tuned him up on the feet, not at all. And also you have to consider Jouban's a pretty good defensive wrestler, and probably at least good enough on the ground to survive against Gunnar Nelson, where other people would be swallowed up. He's a jiu-jitsu player, actually, in origin. That's his background. So I don't think his jiu-jitsu game is like mind-blowingly good, but he doesn't have to fear being taken down as much as somebody like Albert Tumenov did. Like Tumenov did not want to be taken down by Nelson. It was very clear he hated being on the ground with him. Jouban won't be like that. So he has a bit of a security blanket there. And
well, he's also just a way better long-range striker than
Tumenov. Yeah,
Tumenov is a pocket boxer, and that was kind of being in at that range with a guy who can take you down and hurt you on the ground.
Yeah,
whereas I think Jouban is going to try and stick Nelson on the end of his kicks and on the end of his left hand.
Yeah, Jouban is like if second Overeem mention of the episode, I seem to find a way to bring Overeem into every fight discussion I have. But he's like if Greg Jackson, in retooling Overeem's game to account for his chin and everything, he made the same adjustments, but also was able to wipe Overeem's mind so that he didn't know he could be knocked out. You know what I mean? So he couldn't make his chin better, but he fixed his style and he fixed his confidence issues, and that's Alan Jouban. At least that's the Alan Jouban we've seen in his last two fights. This mobile, long-distance, southpaw power striker who, yes, he can get a little too crazy sometimes, he can get touched up, but he does not react badly to it and tends to be really tough and resilient and has staged plenty of impressive comebacks before.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to like Alan Jouban's game, and I'm excited about this fight. I think it's the most interesting fight on the card.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm going with Alan Jouban, actually, over Gunnar Nelson. I would not be surprised if Gunnar Nelson won, even by a knockout. Like first-round knockout would not surprise me. But I think the longer this fight goes on, the more Jouban's going to have an advantage, and I think that'll be more pronounced because Jouban works the body and the legs very, very well. And Nelson really doesn't seem to know how to defend those kinds of things. So
yeah, I mean, Nelson, this was just as kind of a side note and a corollary. Nelson is actually, I think, a genuinely bad defensive striker.
Mm-hmm.
Like not just average, not just like still figuring things out, like is actively bad.
All he can do to defend a strike is to step out of range or to parry. I mean, he doesn't have head movement in his arsenal, really.
Yeah.
He's beyond that. He also doesn't tuck his chin and tends to come in when these big explosive movements. So yeah, Gunnar Nelson gets hit hard by people who are willing to stand in front of him, hit him back.
Yeah, and I think Jouban will do that. God, I mean, have you talked me into picking Jouban here? I feel like the dynamism of Nelson is going to find a way to get it done.
Yeah.
Like he's going to find a way to get his takedown, and on the mat, I actually do think there is a massive advantage for Nelson. Like I think if Nelson gets him down, I think Nelson will submit him.
I agree. So, I mean, Nelson's jiu-jitsu is pretty next level, which just makes Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu terrifying. And let us not speak of Jake Shields, what that says about Jake Shields' grappling. But I think Nelson will have an advantage. My point is just that it may be less pronounced. And Jouban won't have to, I don't think Jouban will have the same trepidation about being taken down as some of the other guys that Nelson has done that to. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, Tumenov, and you could tell in the Leon Edwards fight with Tumenov as well, he does not like being taken down. He's not comfortable on his back.
He was totally gun shy of it in that fight. But, okay, well, we still got more fights to talk about here. What else? We got to move on.
Yes.
You wanted to talk about, do you want to talk about Joe Duffy real quick? Do you want to talk about Arnold Allen? What are we looking at
Let's
here?
do Alan Amirkhani real quick. We'll try to run through these, just a couple of brief words on each fight. Alan Amirkhani, what is your feeling of Arnold Allen? Because I am not really quite sure what to make of him as a prospect. He kind of just, inconsistency is kind of the word that comes to my mind when I look at him. You know,
that's a good question. I don't feel like I have a good read on
him. Like, what is he good at? You know what I mean?
What is what?
What's he good at?
I think he's good at everything. I think he is an MMA native,
right?
Who started training and started fighting when he was a teenager. I think he's coming into his physical prime. I think he's becoming a better athlete. But really, what I think he does, I think he's a top control guy. I think he's very good from top position. I think he's got good control. I think he's got good passes. I think he's a really good ground striker. I think he's part of the renaissance of ground striking that we're seeing right now. That he works in combination. He maintains control as he's doing it. He can generate power in tight spaces. That, I think, is the real strength of his game.
But I don't think he knows it. You know what I mean? The MMA native thing is always what stands out to me when I watch Arnold Allen, is that I don't think he knows where his biggest strengths are. I think he wants to do everything and feels equally confident everywhere. When I agree, I think top position, I also think in the clinch, he's very good.
Yeah, he's a very good clinch fighter.
But he just kind of fights everywhere, every fight. And I think that may be a big weakness against Amirkhani, who is certainly less well-rounded, but also he fights with incredible focus on getting exactly what he wants to happen.
Mm-hmm. I still do not know what to make of Amirkhani.
Yeah.
At this point, I think he's a pretty fantastic athlete. I think he's a really good takedown artist. I think he's an aggressive submission hunter. I don't know if he's any good as a striker, frankly.
Yeah, I don't think
there's a lot of reason to think that if he's forced into a striking matchup, he's going to be competent there.
Did you not see the little tinges of Conor McGregor in his fight with Mike Wilkinson?
I did not.
Because now he's at SBG, right? So now he was in there like southpaw. He like darted in with a straight left hand and then jumped out of range. Yeah, he's still figuring out how to strike. But on the ground, I think he's a great takedown artist. Obviously a very well-credentialed wrestler. On the ground, I get this feeling anyway watching Amirkhani that he's less of a skilled grappler. I mean, he's obviously very skilled, but less skill as a defining factor than just natural ability. Like, I think his balance on the ground is outstanding, and I don't think it's a thing of skill. I think it's probably some skill from wrestling, but also just being a really well-balanced, powerful, and explosive athlete. It's really difficult to shake Amirkhani off and to get him to fall over, even when he's in a precarious position on the ground.
Oh, see, I think that there is a lot of skill to that. I mean, I think he's got a ton of core strength, first and foremost. I think that's a huge piece of it. But I think it's a blend of wrestling type mat work. And like, he's got a great front headlock, right? Like I think he understands transitional positions, probably due to his wrestling background, in a way that's hard for a lot of more traditional type grapplers to comprehend. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what his ceiling is. I think he could either be like a top 5 guy, or I think he could just never get any better than he is right now. Yeah, and I don't know. I think I'm picking Alan.
He could be Khabib, though. You know what I mean? Like, he does seem to have that swagger, that confidence in his ground game. Yeah, that focus is what throws me off. I like Arnold Allen, and I think he has, but he's always in a tough fight. You know what I mean? Like, he's always in a back and forth fight. And I think it's because he just doesn't pursue a specific area. And Amirkhani does not have that problem. So I think I am going with Amirkhani.
Yeah, I'm just not there with Amirkhani. I think I understand Alan's game a lot better.
Yeah, I guess so. I think what is very likely is that either Amirkhani, to me, I think the two most likely outcomes are Amirkhani getting early takedowns, taking Alan down, and doing some damage and possibly submitting him, or him doing that a bit and then gassing because his stamina's maybe not great. He's maybe a little too gung-ho with everything he does, a little too used to those like 30-second wins. And Arnold Allen, who is very well conditioned, takes over in round 3 and knocks him out. I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's why nobody has yet to, and I don't think we really know how good Amirkhani's defensive wrestling is.
True. Nobody's even tried to shoot on him.
Nobody has shot a takedown on him in the UFC.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
and Alan will, from the clinch especially, he's got some really nice little foot sweeps.
Yeah, I think Alan is going to make this a kind of a grinding back and forth fight, and in that kind of fight, I like his process over Amirkhani's dynamism.
Good shout. Yeah, that's a good thought.
So, because again, like, I think Amirkhani, I don't necessarily agree that he imposes the kind of fight that he wants. I think he just kind of does shit. And it works. Like, I don't know that he's the kind of fighter where there's a lot of method to his madness.
Maybe you're right. Yeah, we'll see. So, it's an interesting fight. I mean, I'm not really upset about it, even though it's a prospect versus prospect fight. I think there's two guys that both of us have a lot of questions about. Like, who are they? What is their style? What are they good at? What are they bad at? Let's find out. Throw them in there against someone good.
Yeah, it's a good fight from that perspective. So, Tom Breese. We got our guy, Tom Breese.
Yeah, we got Tom Breese and Joe Duffy on this card. We'll make those the last two guys we talk about. We'll kind of discuss them together, I guess. Both TriStar guys, both solid boxers.
So is Arnold Allen.
Is he really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
TriStar now. I like that. Joe Duffy and Tom Breese. So a lot of TriStar guys in this card. A lot of guys who come over from the UK to go to TriStar. That may be the next generation of TriStar fighters, are all of these fighters from Europe. But Joe Duffy and Tom Breese, both very solid fighters. Breeze, we talked a little bit on Twitter about his fight with Sean Strickland. I didn't think Breeze looked bad in that fight at all. In fact, I think both of us thought, even though it was a very close fight, and Strickland maybe had the more killer instinct under Pride rules, I suppose. In the unified rules, we both thought that Breeze probably deserved the win. 29-28, I would say. So, solid fight against a surprisingly experienced and crafty striker. My question is that the kind of thing that Breeze wants to do against Oluwale Barboza, or does he want to try and push his grappling advantage against the guy who really can't grapple that well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fight is Breeze's to lose either way. Like, Barboza is a super, super dangerous guy, but Breeze is really crafty on the feet. I think he's in the process of becoming a really excellent striker.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like his boxing is sharp and getting sharper every time out. And I think now that he's not cutting to 170, he can let his shots go a little bit more. I think he was kind of afraid of gassing in those fights. And that's partially why he held himself back the way that he did. Because you could see, like, it's there. He can see the shots, and he really struggled a little bit to pull the trigger, which made his fights closer than they need to be. But the Barboza fight, like, Barboza has no idea what he's doing on the ground. No idea. He
almost has no idea what he's doing on the feet. You know what I mean? Like, he's a weird fighter. The kind of, he may be the easiest dude to hit with a reactive takedown in all of MMA. He's like the kind of ball up and hunch and then literally leap into a hook from 6 feet away. That's a takedown waiting to happen. I know Breeze hasn't finished any takedowns in the UFC, but I would be shocked if he didn't hit a reactive takedown on Barboza with relative ease.
Oh, Breeze is a good takedown artist.
Yeah,
like, when he puts his mind to it, he's got a really nice clinch takedown game. But actually, Breeze, I don't think trained at TriStar for this fight. I think he stayed in. I think he stayed in the UK.
He should still be okay, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, he was. I wouldn't be surprised if Faraz was still in his corner, though.
Probably,
but he just didn't go over to TriStar for this. Breeze was doing boxing with guys like working his boxing with guys like Anthony Joshua. He sparred a bunch of Joshua's sparring partners to get ready for this fight. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks. Like, I think he has decided that his game is just jiu-jitsu and boxing, and that's what he's going to do, and he's going to be really good at both of them.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to see it, and a more patient version of that kind of fighter than we're used to seeing, like a little more tactical. He's not a Carlos Condit.
Yeah, but that's also kind of who Joe Duffy is. Joe Duffy is also basically a boxing and jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, and that'll be the question in his fight with Reza Madadi, is if he has touched up his wrestling, because Reza Madadi may be the oldest lightweight on the roster. Keeping Francis, what's that?
Ancient, though. I don't know. How do you count 2 years in Swedish prison?
Yeah, probably really good. I mean, Swedish quality of life seems to be better than ours across the board, so I imagine their prisons are really nice too. Like, stealing a handbag may in fact just be a way for Reza Madadi to get a brief vacation. Reza Madadi, old man, right? Not capable of really hanging with Joe Duffy on the feet, especially if Duffy brings the pressure and engages in the pocket over and over. But pretty solid takedown artist. Decorated Greco-Roman and freestyle wrestler. Solid submission grappler as well. The takedown defense, or lack thereof, that Joe Duffy showed in his fight with Dustin Poirier does worry me. I don't think this is a fight we should really be concerned about Joe Duffy losing, but it's a good fight to test if he has shored up that area of his game. Because you can be a guy who's just, your offensive capabilities are boxing and jiu-jitsu. That's fine. But Tom Breeze is really hard to take down. That's part of his success. You know, he's very strong in the clinch, and he can hit a good shot himself. Joe Duffy was kind of woefully bad stopping the takedowns of Dustin Poirier.
Well, I want to modify that a little bit. Okay. I think in open space, I don't think there's anything wrong with his takedown defense. I think he struggled against a really good cage wrestler. Yeah. And Madadi is a good cage wrestler. Like, you can see clearly the reasoning behind this matchup, which is that I think the UFC would like to push Joe Duffy. They would like to have another Irish guy that they can put on cards there and have headline that they can build up as a star. And I think Joe Duffy, as an offensive talent, has that kind of star potential. But you can't put him into high-profile matchups if he can't stuff a fucking takedown against the fence. Yeah,
they basically got to figure out if it's worth pouring or what kind of investment he will be. If he'll be like a Paige Van Zandt, where you just kind of bank him a little bit for a certain crowd, and then you feed him to people that do have long-term potential, or if you can actually promote him as a potential star.
Yeah, and so Madadi is the perfect guy to figure that out.
Yeah.
The heart and soul of Madadi's game is wrestling and clinching against the fence. So if you can stuff that part of Madadi's game, then you can and should beat him handily. I'm inclined to think that Duffy can. I think he's a well-trained fighter. He's clearly a smart fighter. There's no way that there's any question about what he's going to do. It was a little bit of a surprise that Poirier went so heavily to that game in that fight. Like, I could see how you're a smart coach and you're a smart fighter and you're thinking, how is Dustin Poirier going to approach me? Not thinking that clinch wrestling is going to be that cage wrestling is going to be a huge part of that. Like, I think you can be forgiven for that. If you screw this up against Madadi, then I don't know what to tell you.
And to be even more fair to Duffy, I mean, the only reason Dustin Poirier went to that aspect of his MMA game is because he was actually kind of getting lit up. I mean, he and Poirier were lighting each other up, but Duffy was taking the shots and firing back with no fear in his eyes whatsoever. And Dustin Poirier does not have that same level of confidence. So, Joe Duffy still came out in a way looking really good and impressive in that fight. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think I would be really surprised if Joe Duffy, with TriStar and everyone behind him, did not come into this fight with, I think he's capable of wrestling a lot better than he did over a relatively short period of time. I mean, look how quickly he picked up boxing. You know what I mean? He spent a year doing 7 professional boxing fights and came back to MMA and was like one of the best boxers in his division. So he clearly has the ability to learn things very quickly and pick up new skills. The fact that it wasn't there already in the Poirier fight is worrying, but I think what you say about how that fight played out, that's a good point. So I do have a little faith in Joe Duffy here. As long as he can stalk the takedowns, he will probably destroy Reza Madadi on the feet. And I think that's what I'm expecting to happen.
Yeah, on the feet, this is a genuinely not competitive fight, I don't think.
No.
Like the speed advantage, the technique advantage, the range advantage, the variety advantage, Duffy. I want to bring this back to something we talked about earlier real quick, because I think this is what makes Duffy special as a fighter. He has great eyes. Yeah. He does a fantastic job of reading what his opponent's throwing at him and picking and choosing his shots.
And well-trained defense.
Yeah. Very well schooled, a technical but also an organic fighter. I love watching him strike. He is one of my favorite strikers to watch do work. So I hope we get a chance to see him do that a little bit in this fight.
Yeah, 100% co-signed. I think Madadi fights in these bursts generally as a striker. He has some ability, but does not like to exchange, does not like to be stuck in a certain range for long. Joe Duffy, it's astounding to think that this dude is like a Japanese jiu-jitsu guy with very little striking experience a few years ago, and then just dedicates himself to boxing, and now he has a genuine boxing advantage over almost everyone he fights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, which really makes me want to see Duffy McGregor 2 someday, because holy shit, would that be a good striking battle.
Oh, yeah. I sincerely hope that Duffy, I think Duffy has been one of my guys for a long time now. He's a fighter that I really enjoy watching. So I hope that we get to see him pull that aspect of his game together and get into some higher profile matchups. Because I think there are more good matchups for him as you go up the division. There are more guys that he can be in really fun, entertaining, compelling fights with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. So. All right. Well, I think that's all we really have time to cover for Manuwa versus Anderson. And we've gotten everything out of the way we wanted to get out of the way for Belfort versus Gastelum. So that's pretty much it for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Before we wrap up entirely, Pat, why don't you tell us what you have coming out this week?
Not a ton on the MMA side. I think I'm doing a complete guide for this weekend's fights and maybe one other small piece. But I will have a new episode of Fall of Rome out on Thursday. We're going to be running through the calamitous 5th century and barbarian invasions and the collapse of the imperial court and why there were no more emperors and the rise of the successor kingdoms in the West. That's going to be Fall of Rome this week. Otherwise, that's really about it. Mostly a lot of planning and reading and things of that nature. Nice. What are you doing, Connor?
I did just listen to your economy episode, by the way. Very good.
Oh, thank you. Much appreciated.
Well, no, I highly recommend it. Anybody who's listening to this show, even if you don't think that you have a huge interest, I maintain that generally people who think that they don't care about history are people who were just not taught history well. Because if you can teach history in an engaging way, how can you not be fascinated by it? You get an interesting story about people very much like you from a world very much unlike your own. So, yeah, Fall of Rome, definitely recommend it. I've been enjoying it. As for me, I don't know. It's not an inspiring time in MMA. I think what I'm going to be focusing on for the next few weeks, trying to write about, especially get the taste of like all the time I spent writing about Woodley Thompson out of my mouth when it ended up being the kind of fight that it was. I think I'm going to focus on doing a series about boxing for MMA. It's a thing that people ask about a lot, and it's something that I'm very interested in. Like just the fundamental differences between boxing technique in MMA and boxing, I think are often overstated, but also misunderstood, because there are differences in what you can do in the cage versus the ring that I think should be addressed. So we're talking hand position, we're talking combinations, we're talking range, we're talking all the things that differ, and also touching on the misconceptions, this fortunately fading idea that you can't move your head in MMA the same way you can in boxing. I'm going to touch on all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm not sure exactly which the first segment of that topic will be that I'll cover, but something to do with fist fighting, boxing for mixed martial arts. So that's what I'm going to be doing this week, as well as, of course, the full Sherdog preview of UFC London, Manoa versus Anderson. And otherwise, that's it. Make sure you check out our bonus episode. We're going to have one coming out soon in light of the defeat of Vitor Belfort at the hands of Kelvin Gastelum. We're going to talk about Vitor as an old fighter, but also about old fighters in general. Talk about a few of our favorite old-timers and also the benefits of age, that sometimes fighters actually do get better in marked ways after what should be the end of their prime. So we'll be talking about that on the next bonus episode. Keep your eyes peeled for that one this week. And otherwise, we will catch you all next time on Heavy Hands. Please hit us with any questions you may have on social media. Pat is at Patrick_Wyman on Twitter. I am at BoxingBush, BUSCH. And one final piece of promo. If you are a Patreon subscriber, if you're a patron and you have not yet sent your information to boxingbush@gmail.com, please do so. You can get access to our private Slack chat. Anybody from $1 up, anybody who has donated basically any amount of money to us on Patreon can send me an email and get in there. We had some people discussing the fights last weekend. It's pretty cool. And there are like 210 other people that listen to this show and like it enough to give money to it that you can interact with and have fight discussion, as well as, occasionally, time to time with Pat and I as well. So go ahead and do that, boxingbush@gmail.com. And with all of that out of the way, I guess there's nothing left to say other than, if you came here for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. It's been Heavy Hands.